So this is Prevention and Recovery Solutions. Prevention is the best solution. And we have two panelists. All right. So I'm just going to give you a little brief background about our panelists. And Brandy, since I do not have your bio, you get to introduce yourself and tell everybody anything that you want to tell them. So we'll go from there. But our panelists today, Tom Mcclure, and you can see on your program all of the things that Mr. Tom has been involved in. One of the things that I have found intriguing about Tom when I met him several years ago was the work that he's doing in foreign countries with recovery. And he is a native Kentuckian, but he is all over the world. And I'm sure that he's going to share some more of that with you, but he's going to be sharing some of the work that the Elks do. And we in Operation Unite have so appreciated the materials and the pamphlets and brochures that they have given to us that we're being able to share with our coalitions, our Unite clubs, different programs and meetings that we have. It's excellent material, and I think he's going to be sharing some of that. And then Dr. Al Mooney is going to be talking and sharing. Dr. Kathy read that wonderful bio of Dr. Al, and I'm not going to go into that again. I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Dr. Al that I know personally. I met Al Mooney on January 28, 2008. And the way that I remember that is because that was the day, 5,000 something days ago, that our son became a patient at Willingway Hospital. And for parents, John and I, who had no idea what to expect out of a treatment facility, a treatment program, who had the mindset that you could go to a treatment program for 30 days and you were well. 14 years ago, it was shocking. And the conversations that we had afterwards, every few days, they would call us from Willingway. They gave us a copy of the recovery book, first edition, and said, this is going to be Josh's recovery Bible. And so they would call us and say, Josh is on pages, you need to read pages 43 through 58. This is where Josh is right now. And it was eye-opening for us. It truly was. But this was in the day cell phones were just beginning to come on. And Josh had been a student at Georgetown College. And we had gotten a cell phone for him, but it was in his dad's name. And it was the only cell phone we had in the family. And Josh took great advantage of that cell phone, and that's how he made bought a lot of his drugs and things. But his message on the answering machine was not normal. It was, if you listen to it, you would think this is a crazy person. This is a person who's intoxicated. But the phone was in John's name, my husband. And Al called the house one day because some things in our house had disappeared that I placed a great deal of value on, and I knew exactly where they probably had gone. So I had called Willingway to find out, for Josh to confess where those things were. But Dr. Al called the cell phone back. And he got that message, that answering machine, and he thought it was my husband. And when he called me back, he said, how long has your husband been having a problem? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, the message on this answering machine on his cell phone raises a lot of red flags. And so I said, well, that's actually Josh's message. Yes, it's his dad's phone, but Josh was using it. So a lot of things. But 2 weeks ago, Al, at the National Drug Summit, in my opening speech that day, I shared about the recovery family trees. And the impact that we have on generations. And Al Mooney is part of our family's recovery tree. You know, his dad and his mom who shared that story with Al, who shared that story with Robert B., who shared that story with Mark G., who shared that story with Joshua H. And so you will forever be in our recovery family tree. And I just appreciate that. A lot of other wonderful tales, no, they're not tales, a lot of wonderful other recovery stories of what our family has personally witnessed through Will and Way. And Josh is a 12-stepper. He believes in it strongly. And the work that he's now doing in his community, we're proud of that. And thank you, Al. Thank you. I now have 2 beautiful grandchildren because of that. So Brandy Williamson is going to be sharing about herself in just a moment. She is a counselor with the Appalachian Children's Home and doing valuable work as well. And we also want to talk to you about Camp Unite and getting some of those kids to Camp Unite. But why did we choose this topic today? The National Institute used to be the National Institute for Drug Abuse. They are now known as the National Institute for Drug Addiction, says this about prevention. Prevention and early intervention strategies can reduce the impact of substance use and mental disorders in America's communities. Prevention activities work to educate and support individuals and communities to prevent the use and misuse of drugs and the development of substance use disorders. Substance use and mental disorders can make daily activities difficult and impair a person's ability to work, interact with family, and fulfill other major life functions. Mental and substance use disorders are among the top conditions that cause disability in the United States. Preventing substance use disorders or co-occurring disorders and related problems is critical to behavioral and physical health. And so prevention education is, while a person is struggling with addiction, struggling with a substance use disorder, is critical. But for adolescents, it's also a critical time to begin that prevention. And as a former educator, that's one thing that I'm very concerned about. When it comes to drug prevention, knowledge is power. I truly believe that. And Van Ingram's not in here right now, but I told him I'm going to share with him so he can use it in his PowerPoints. He does not use PowerPoints real often, but what has become one of my favorite slides. And it's a quote from Aubrey Adams, who is the CEO of Every Brain Matters. And it is, drug prevention is the best harm reduction. And I strongly believe that. So today we're talking about it. Effective drug education is important because our young people, and it's getting an earlier and earlier age, that they're being faced with a lot of influences to use both licit and illicit drugs. And what we've seen, with International Fentanyl Awareness Day this week, young people, teenagers, don't seek out illicit drugs. They don't seek out heroin. They go for what they think are safe pharmaceutical drugs, Percocet, Vicodin, benzodiazepine. And what we're finding now is the reason that the overdose death rate among teenagers is rising is because those things that they think are safe are laced with fentanyl. And we're losing teenagers. But what we have to do is work to prevent that. And that's why we need strong prevention programs. That's why the state of Kentucky, Al, thank you for talking about all the wonderful things we're doing. And we truly are. I'm proud to be from this state. But let me tell you, in education, we've not done, and I can say this since I'm a former educator, we have not done a very good job with prevention. And we've not started early enough. That's it. We have put curriculum into schools at certain grade levels and think, okay, they're 8th grade, they're getting ready to go to high school. Let's do this in PE class for 6 weeks and they're going to be fine. Or we do it when they're a junior in high school and we think, oh no, they're getting ready to graduate. We've got to get them ready. So let's do a class here. It doesn't work that way. There has to be a foundation. And we need a K through 12 prevention curriculum in this state that builds upon itself so that we can prevent the problem with our teenagers. So today we're going to be sharing some of the things, the solutions with prevention. And Tom's going to be our first speaker. Then we'll move to Dr. Mooney, and then we'll move to Brandy. We're going to save time. Tom, did you hear me say this? Al? We're going to save time so that people can ask a lot of questions, okay? Thank you.
Well, I've been instructed. I've got 15 minutes. You start the timer. Then the hook comes in, you know, with Cosmina brings in this hook that pulls us out, okay? I'm Tom Mcclure, and I'm really happy to be here today. This is a very important meeting and conference. I'm from this area. I'm from Corbin, born here. And my connection, we can't come from here without some connection with alcohol and drugs and stuff. My mother died at 41, smoker from age 12, you know, and alcoholism and tobacco got her, you know, and so I'm fortunate. I've lived double that age, you know, because I got the message early from education, from prevention. My prevention was watching my mother die, you know, and living in the family where alcoholism was always present and all the problems that related. If you're a kid living in an alcoholic family, you think it's normal. You know, what's going on, the fights on the weekend and all of that. I'm just starting this time right here. So I got a story to tell about Dr. Al before we get into this. I knew his father. I met his father in Atlanta. I saw his mother in Atlanta. Okay, Al. His father was one of the funniest speakers I've ever heard in my life. And he talked about his psychiatric and his jail time. And maybe Al didn't mention it, but when he was in jail, he made all kinds of sandals and leather stuff. And say when he came home, you know, he'd bring all that done. The kids didn't know where he'd been, but they thought he was at some kind of camp, you know, where he was learning, you know, well, he was at some kind of camp. So that's the story of that's the Moody. That's my connection with the interest in this. I'm a volunteer. I'm part of the ELKS National Drug Awareness Prevention Program. And I'm happy to be that. I didn't know what ELKS were. I just simply went to exercise with a guy, with Judge Johnson, who was federal judge. He's now deceased down in Williamsburg. And before I knew it, I kind of got a court summons, a bench warrant to join the ELKS. And I had no idea what the ELKS were, but I got in the ELKS. And the ELKS I found were a fantastic organization in terms of education and prevention. And I'm just going to share a little bit of this information with you, if I may, at this moment. So the ELKS National Drug Awareness Program is part of the consortium that helped put this program on, along with the other wonderful organizations. And they are supporting this Appalachian gathering. The title of this panel is Prevention, and it's the best solution. I believe that. ELK strongly believe that much of the solution to the emergency we are now experiencing in drug abuse and the subsequent death it brings can be prevented with appropriate attention to helping children and youth become more aware of the dangers and damages associated with drug abuse. Al and I got together way back in Europe and in the Middle East, where I was in charge of some programs that were funding community-based prevention and democracy. Of course, I don't know how successful we were with democracy, but anyhow, we did work with some people that were wanting to help others recover from addiction. And so Al was a guy that I found and brought over, and we got connected with recovery efforts in Bosnia, you know, recovery efforts in Egypt, recovery efforts in Romania and Serbia and so on. This Kentucky guy got around a lot, you know. It's amazing what you can do when you're sober. So Al brought the message of recovery. He brought the science and the message, and furthering the 12-step programs, which are critical, established and still going on. Some of the governmental programs faded, but the 12-step programs are still moving. So I want to just address how the Elks approach this. They approach prevention through focus on community and a focus on youth, a focus on education, and a focus on inspiration. And the Elks National Drug Awareness Program strives to teach all children and parents about the dangers of illegal drug use and prevent the abuse of legalized and even prescription drugs, which is a new area and that I learned about. As the largest volunteer drug awareness program in the U.S., the program relies on state, district, and Elks Lodge volunteers who basically put together the materials that you're going to receive here to promote a drug-free lifestyle. And I'm a volunteer, as all the Elks are, that basically here we had about 6 Elks floating around. I don't know if I see any right now, but they brought the materials. They brought this Elks trailer, which is out here. Any Elks material that you find you want to take home, please take it. We've got lots of printed materials. So they're part of the drug awareness program. By taking pride, Elks says, by taking pride in America's communities and youth, the program takes action against youth drug abuse through education and inspiration. So on the community side, for over 40 years, which is amazing, 40 years, the Elks have been involved with trying to develop effective community-based drug prevention programs all over the United States, working through 100 and about 2,000 Elk lodges throughout the country. It's the largest private and voluntary organization dealing with drug prevention and drug awareness in the United States. It's just amazing. I didn't know that. And so here we were able to provide materials to unite. We have materials that you can take home. They're in the red folders that we have here, and you can distribute. And if you want more, we've got them here. So that's one of the things the Elks do to further community prevention and awareness of the drug problem. They donate time and services. The message that I got when I came back from working overseas for about 20 years and so on, I was astounded. People were dropping right and left in this area, you know, from the disease. They'd be at some place one day and the next week they'd be gone. And they're in their 30s and so on. And just at this conference, at this very meeting, there is a person here that basically, in the last 3 weeks, knew 3 people that died from this disease, this disease. 2 from Clay County and 1 from Richmond, 2 men and 1 woman, and all under 40. Can you believe this? I mean, the most productive years. It's the most, the years that they are making alive, and all with children. So what do we leave? We leave children, you know, without the parents. It's an incredible catastrophe, astounding, just amazing to me what was happening here in our part of the world, in the epicenter of, as Al said, of the drug problem. So we have Elk focus on community and then focus on youth. And Elks strongly believe that part of the solution rests in investing in the youth of today. And the leaders who of course will be the leaders of tomorrow. They survive. With that in mind, the Elks Drug Awareness Program reaches out to youth of all ages through its 2,100 lodges and does a lot of development of materials for youth. For example, a comic book that was contributed, designed by Marvel Comics as a gift, and kids can use this for coloring and get some idea that they can say no, you know, when they have the option of testing something new. And since we are a youth-oriented program, children and youth, I'd like to play a video that was prepared again by youth in the program, and that cites their approach to recovery, their programs, and how they have dealt with it. And you'll get an idea of another perspective. It's not my perspective, it's their perspective, you know, and how they have managed. With this video, It focuses on youth getting involved with and benefiting from recovery, which is very much in your line of work. The whole idea of the video was inspired by a young person named Jeff Tamayo. And Jeff, who will appear at the end, he's one of the people that didn't make it, which I'm sure you know much about as I do in terms of this awful disease. So if we could play that, then we'll get an idea of how their youth are seeing some of these issues with drugs. Okay. While she's setting this up, there's also the focus on education. We have packets of materials that are available for each of them. Just pick them up at the end of the session. And here you'll have coloring books, you'll have bookmarks, you'll have pamphlets that will describe mostly the drugs that are on the market right now, fentanyl, some of the counterfeit pills, the other issues, other drugs that are basically taking people out. How are we doing?
I've been good.
I will just
Okay,
get someone to do this.
no problem. I can deal with the technologies issues. When I came around, we didn't even have computers. Gives you an idea of where I'm at on the spectrum. So that's kind of my introduction to where the Elks are. They have 90 of these trailers that you see out here throughout the United States. They have the materials and supplies that you will have access to, and they travel around to schools and events and other activities where people can get information. This seems to be the key to survival, the key to basically prevention. In the Elks view is education. So they focus on youth, they focus on education, they focus on community, and they focus on inspiration, inspiring young people, inspiring kids to learn more about this is the
Open our hearts, free every soul. The fear inside, you must let it go. Oh, that monster, before it conquers you. Yeah, we all have demons we fight every day. You get knocked down, but the bell hasn't rang, so keep going. Just stay focused when life seems hopeless. Before life passes you by, you must, like a bird with broken wings always. You've got to reach for the stars. It might seem far. Ooh, don't stop. You gotta try. Oh, 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 you gotta try. Never stop dreaming, even away. Nothing can stop you from winning this race, so keep going. Just stay focused. Yeah, I am the tiger, I own the pride. Every storm ends with the rainbow in the sky. You are golden. If no one else noticed, don't stop, keep going. Before life passes you by, you must, like a bird with broken wings always. You gotta reach for the stars. It might seem far. Ooh, don't stop. You gotta try. Oh, 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 you gotta try.
I think the biggest piece of advice I have for someone going through addiction or thinking about going to rehab is being honest with yourself. Don't be afraid to get help. I think that's the biggest stigma that we're trying to erase is don't be afraid to ask for help.
Thank you very much. How many of you realize that the Elks were so involved with prevention? Yes, yes. It's just an amazing program. It's a several $1 million program. 95% of it is with volunteers from all over the community. And the materials are donated and it's supported by people that basically are committed to prevention. I think I'm approaching the end of my time. Yes. And thank you for letting me share. And then we'll be on the panel here. And when you depart, please pick up this packet of materials. You may also access all of the materials through the Elks website, which will be in this material. We want to focus on Appalachia, and I think we've got some good prospects for the future. Thank you very much.
Our next panelist is going to be Dr. Al Mooney, and he's going to be sharing along the same line. I hope that you share some about Georgia Southern. All right. Great work that they did there. When Josh went to Willing Way Hospital and then on to Louis Street for 14 months, I think he was there at Louis Street, he needed 6 hours to graduate from Georgetown College with a degree. And thinking that he would never achieve that, Al's going to explain to you how Josh completed those 6 hours of college through Georgia Southern, but his certificate, his diploma is from Georgetown College here in Kentucky. So Al, if you'll come up now and share with us the importance of prevention education on that level.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, y'all ready for another hour? Prevention is such an important subject, and I promise I'll stick to a couple of things, but it added to it that Nancy wanted me to talk about the Center for Addiction Recovery at Georgia Southern University. Because there's potential for something like that in a place like Union or other places. And I'll go through my high points of that. But first, let me say a little bit more about prevention, because I come from an alcoholic family, and out of 4 kids in my family, I'm the oldest of 4 siblings. I've got 2 brothers, and then the youngest in our family is a sister who was born after my folks got into recovery. And I'm the only one that's, you heard me, I'm not even sure whether I can say it was prevented or not, but at least I don't qualify for AA or NA or anything. And a lot of that relates to prevention. I carry the genes. Even when I took my volunteer service opportunity with AA, I asked, now because you have to be a non-alcoholic to be a Class A trustee of Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, now how do y'all measure that? Is it based on your DNA or is it behavior? And they said, well, it's behavior. Don't worry about your DNA. So I thought, okay, I'm good. And but I do have some traits, and that's probably the first rule in prevention, is that it's like any other allergy. If you don't ever get exposed to what you're allergic to, you will never develop the disease. That's one thing I tell my pilots. I say, if you don't ever want to be accused of being a drunk pilot, especially those people that call me with DWIs or all these drunk records, I say, it's so easy. All you got to do is just stop drinking. And then it's impossible for you to be in trouble with alcohol anymore. And you'd be amazed at the pushback I get when people do that. But it's true. And I watched it in my family. I'm the only one. My mom and dad loved me, but they were always a little disappointed because I never met the qualifications to be an AA member. We looked up in the family, looked up for that in the family so much. But I found a path to my relationship with other 12-step fellowships, and also now with service to AA. But then I've got 2 kids. My wife and I have been, gosh, March was our 50th wedding anniversary, so I can't complain about my marriage too much. It seems to be working. But we got 2 kids. One's an AA and one married an alcoholic. So that's the other thing about those of us that don't develop the disease, somehow have internal GPS to be attracted to it. So that's a whole issue that falls into prevention. And now we've got 4 grandkids, and one of those, the oldest one, is 14, and he's beginning to explore. And as granddad, which is another thing we won't talk about much, but it's not just parenting. That's critically important. But grandparenting, I've discovered, is really important, because I can have a relationship with my grandkids that they can tell me secrets that they never tell their mom and dad. And then we work on things for like 3 months ago, and I'm a little worried about my grandkids' exposure. But my oldest grandson spent all his allowance buying a vape capsule from a friend on the school bus. And not only did he spend his money doing that, it was so stupid, but when he got home, he found out it was an empty capsule. And boy, I still hadn't finished that grandfather talk with him, but it hopefully will be related in some way to prevention for him. But prevention doesn't only mean never having a problem. In the medical world, we think of sometimes what we call secondary prevention, where you can end up making an impact so that the ball doesn't roll further down the hill. That happened with my son-in-law. My daughter liked him, and they could have a potential relationship. They've been married like 15 years now, and well, longer than that, gosh, 20, because my grandson's 14 years old. But anyways, but she told the man that she later married and who she loved, and told us that they had a relationship. But she said, there's one thing that, you smoke a little marijuana, and that just doesn't fit with our family narrative. So you need to give up your marijuana, or we just need to go separate ways. And he said, oh, that's no big deal. I'll just give it up. That's not anything to think about. So he promised her that, and he did. And I got a phone call 3 months later from, she was calling me in tears, saying, Jonathan, still smoking marijuana. I said, well, duh. What does that tell you? And she knew, and I didn't have to tell her what to do, but what she did, she went to him. And this is kind of what prevention in the family does, in my opinion, because it got him into treatment. She said, look, I told you last year that if we're going to have a relationship, drugs were not going to be in the picture. I don't come from a family where that's an option. And you had a choice of drugs or me, and you chose the drugs. So you're out of here, fella. And I'll never do that again. You know the spiel. And she said, well, either one or two things. Either you lied to me and you don't love me like you've been telling me for a year that you love me, or the only other thing that can happen is there is a disease where people put substances in between themselves and the person they love most. So you either lied to me, which means you're out, or you got this disease and you need to go get treatment. And he said, tell me a little more about it. And she kind of explained to her maximum. And then she said, look, my dad does this for a living, and this is his line. Why don't you give him a call if you want to know more? And so I get a cell phone call from her boyfriend, later to be fiance, saying, I love your daughter, but I understand. She said it was her or the drugs, and I chose the drugs, but what do I do? And I said, well, and she said, he told me, she says, I've got a disease called addiction. What can I do? And I said, well, you call me, I'll explain it to you. And he got kind of the talk y'all got last hour. And he said, yeah, I'll go get some treatment. And he went into treatment, never had a drink or a drug since then. And on the way from Raleigh to Statesboro, where he checked into Willingway, we had the most wonderful conversation for 6 hours. He was asking me questions because he wasn't threatened. We didn't get mad, but he knew that drugs had come between him and a person he loved. And the rest of the story, he's got nearly 20 years of sobriety now, 2 kids who are at risk, but moving forward. So I've got a lot of personal connections with prevention. The Georgia Southern thing is really, really cool. And I'm amazed that we can see our own stigma and prejudices in college life and education, because what happened, and this is what our foundation intervened on because we didn't like it and it wasn't right. But so many people get into good recovery and then they can't get a job, they can't get housing. I had a family member who got into recovery and all he could get was a minimum wage job, which will not support any big place out of the hood to live. And that's a sad state of affairs. And I'm so excited that Kentucky is intervening with some of those supportive services to allow recovery to take hold. And some places don't have those things, and they act like people never got good treatment or weren't motivated. But Georgia Southern had a few people that sneaked in and got a degree, and they all did well in recovery. But when these people would apply the kind of grade problems that Nancy mentioned, you know, you got a bad record from your disease of addiction, and all of a sudden the admissions committee says you're not college material. And we saw person after person get rejected for consequences of when they were using, now that they were sober and were the brightest kids in the room. And that was unfair. And so we proposed, you know, colleges, if you got plenty of money, remember, if you want something from a college, you offer them money and they will do whatever you tell them to do to get your money. And that was, it wasn't a lot of money, but we gave a grant to fund a campus addiction recovery program. And they said, sure, we'll take it. And then to get it though, the point was to allow these kids that had been rejected, but who had advocacy from the Center for Addiction Recovery, that we knew in recovery they had potential. And so the center advocated for them, and the hard leap. But if you're on an admission committee for a college, you do not want people tampering in your business. So we just said, okay, if you don't want the money, that's fine. But if you want the money, we're going to provide advocacy through the Center for Addiction Recovery. And then when we advocate for somebody, you have to override your own rejection to get them matriculated. And if you go to Duke or Carolina, all the places around me, they talk about recovery centers. But if you're vetting a campus recovery program, ask them if they have the authority to override the admission committee's rejection. And almost none of them will say they do. And technically, even at Georgia Southern, it was an appeal that nobody, with advocacy from the Center for Addiction Recovery, nobody lost the appeal. So legally, the admission was still within the admission committee, but they never reject somebody that has center advocacy. And so then they began to accumulate. The first data came out on about 50 people that, guess what? They didn't advocate for people that didn't have good recovery. So out of these 50 people, all of a sudden, a big party school, which the bar's not very high at Georgia Southern that time, they start seeing that the graduation rates of these kids went from way, way low, like their bias and stigma told them they were. These kids aren't college material because they all had letters saying that. They got a graduation rate of 90%. They had the GPA for Georgia Southern was 2.7. The GPA for these campus recovery, the alcoholics and addicts, was 3.7. I mean, that blew the faculty people out of the water. And then going on to graduate school was another benchmark they used. And normally at Georgia Southern, and I'm making up this number, I'm not sure, but it's 30 to 40% might go to some graduate education. And out of these recovering students, the alcoholics, the drug addicts, all the people that had a letter saying you're not college material, about 80% of them got accepted into graduate education. And so when confronted with the data about how bright people in recovery are, if they're in recovery, because I mean, if you leave treatment, there's some campus recovery programs that take you in for treatment. But what I believe is you got to build a good foundation of recovery before you are capable of being the kind of student that represents recovery for what it really is. And all of a sudden now, guess what? You know, colleges like to have the cream of the crop. So now Georgia Southern is advertising because their U.S. Business and World Report ratings went up so high. They keep it a secret that it's the alcoholics and addicts that drive it up. But now they're out there recruiting. If you know somebody that is bright and in good recovery, you can't fake it. But then Georgia Southern is a good prospect to get your education. And they're riding that wave now with academic success on the backs of alcoholics and addicts who have good recovery. And I went to one of their functions. They had a fundraiser or some celebration. And I went to a function. I met this nerdy guy who I said, how long you been in the center? He said, oh, I'm not in. I go out where all the rest of my friends go out and drink and drug all weekend. And these are the only guys that will help me study all weekend. So he said, so I just like hanging out with them because I came here to get an education. Sometimes it's hard to find it. So there's some attributes of recovery. Remember in Bill Wilson's last days, he moved beyond what the big book and AA normally talk about and said part of recovery for a mature alcoholic in recovery is having a goal of putting more into the world than your alcoholism took out. Bill Wilson called it becoming a citizen of the world. And campus recovery now, I've seen do that in a lot of places. I see it happening around here. That's why I'm so proud of what I'm involved with and can watch here. So I'll be quiet now, but prevention is so, so important, and there's so much we can represent. Thank you.
And now Brandy Williamson's going to share the work that she does with the Appalachian Children's.
Yes.
All right. Do you want to hold or do you want to
I'll
stand?
just stand. I'm
Okay.
pretty loud naturally. I don't know how I ended up on this panel following these phenomenal men in their careers. I've been in addictions in this area locally for about the past 15 years, been working in addictions. I've been with Appalachian Children's Home for around 15 years at this point. I've been with Hope City Women's Rehab for about the past 7. So we are familiar with the local programs with Unite. Several of my women have came through that. The kids at the children's home, they participate in the Unite clubs and stuff like that. So, but following them, I can kind of just piggyback off what they're saying. I think Benjamin Franklin said this a long time ago, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound in cure. And talking about school programs, my 6-year-old, she's in kindergarten. She can't tell you what meth is, but she knows what drugs are. Just being in the field, you know, sometimes you're at home, you get phone calls and stuff, and then they get curious. Same thing with my 9-year-old. She's a little more educated on it. But I feel like the sooner we get, you know, information in their hands, the better it's going to be. I think college programming, offering, you know, these recovery solutions, I think those are phenomenal. They didn't have those when I graduated from Union long time ago now. They didn't have that then, but just putting and implementing all these programs beforehand, as opposed to, because I work on both sides. You know, I'm working with after the fact now. You know, we didn't have this education. I didn't know what half this stuff was. I mean, when I started in the field, I'll never forget my first client that actually just didn't smoke marijuana. Like actually just beyond, it was when the opioid crisis started. So I've been here for a minute. And I remember that, and like it's progressed so much now, and it's lack of information. That's not it's not gonna be like 100% cure all, but just putting more information in their hands from when they're little. You know, and then offering the services. The big success I've seen in recovery with women and with children is just the support system and the services after the fact, because you can put them in a program for 6 months, 9 months, a year, you know, and push all this information to them and give them all these skills or their toolbox, if you will, and build them into, you know, somebody who could live a sober life or sober setting, but then you just let them go and they have no services or support systems. The support and resilience, I feel like, is the key to what is going to help people be successful in recovery, and then still obviously reducing stigmas associated with it, and kind of really, and this is for another day, but how we handle addiction from the point of entry into treatment. Because a lot of what I see, you know, I always ask, do you come here by choice or other means? Because they used to say choice or force, and I just didn't really like the terminology there. And I'll get a lot of court order. I'm court ordered to be here. And those are sometimes my favorite ones. when they start to heal, which, you know, I give very early recovery, first 6 to 9 months, when their brains and minds and bodies start to heal, and they're like, oh, okay, I see this now, I understand this. And just, I mean, it's just educating them too. It's just, like I said, kind of on the other side of what was originally, you know, what prevention is. But I feel like we've come a long way in a short time, but we just have a real long way to go with how we approach these things and what we do to help in our targeted interventions. I mean, you're seeing across the state, you're seeing angel initiatives, you're seeing more and more programming up and opening up. You're seeing minds change on what works and what doesn't, because here's the thing. I mean, if this was a room full of people in active addiction, there's no cookie cutter. There's no checklist. Hey, you meet 1 through 10 and you're going to be fine. No, it's you could meet, you know, 1 through 7, as opposed to you can meet 1 through 3 and you both still have a successful recovery. So it's about balance, a whole lot of education, a whole lot of support, and then the real want to change on the other side of that. So I feel like the direction everything is moving in the state is great. Like I said, compared to 15-ish years ago when I started in this field, but I just feel like we just have to keep fighting and working and educating even law enforcement and the government on what we need to help. And that's all I got.
So we have some questions that have already been presented to us, but we're going to open up right now. If any of you in the room have a question for either Brandy or Dr. Al or Tom about any of the programs. And what we'd like for you to do, if you wouldn't mind, we can bring the microphone to you, but we'd rather have you up here with the microphone so that everybody that's connecting with us virtually can hear and see you as well. So do we have any questions from the audience in this room? Yes, sir. You'll come on up. Yes, if you don't mind.
Okay. Ms. Williamson, I just had a question for you with
Yeah.
the children's home. What do y'all do directly for prevention, whether it's for the children or youth or for the families?
Well, really, I gotta come back. Okay, so, truly, unfortunately, once we get them, they're court ordered to rehabilitative services. They're, got a designated social worker and stuff. So it really depends on once we get them in, once we get through their assessment processing and stuff to see where they're at. Like, are they, a lot of the time, they're already in active addiction of their own. But if not, and I can't give you statistics. I'm not a numbers girl. The numbers are very low that they've not either experimented or haven't, something you could diagnose from the DSM and on a substance use disorder. But the ones that aren't, it's just general education. The same things I teach my own kids, depending on the age, you vary it to age appropriateness there. But on the other side, they're getting true, like, in-house individual addiction treatment services. So it's good. It's an awesome place. You should check it out.
Right. Just stay up here because we had another question that came in. And they just wanted to know about the Appalachian Children's Home. What ages you serve? Is it a residential program?
Okay.
I'll sort of.
Okay, Appalachian Children's Home is a residential treatment facility for 11 to 17-year-old males and females committed to DCBS or CHFS social services that need treatment for various reasons. They're not all addiction or, substance use disorder cases, although I'd say we're right around 80 to 90% if I had to start putting statistics out there on how many come in with that or co-occurring disorders. Woo, getting myself tongue-tied there. It's about, it used to be like a structured around 9-month program. The Family Preservation Act has changed a lot of things. So now it's very specifically tailored to their treatment needs. So we can keep them for, anywhere from a few months to, even longer than 8 or 9 months of what it used to be. I'd say, I think it takes 18, but most programs or rehabs don't give you that long to try to work with them. So for whatever period we have them for, whether it be 3 months, and sometimes we get them, hey, they're 2 months till they're 18, what can you do? You just try to, just give them this plethora of information and services and resources on how to help. And I focus big on aftercare piece because, once they're in a program for a couple months, well, they think, well, that's it. I'm cured. I'm sober. Well, we're in a really controlled, restrictive setting here. So let's get you these resources in place for after the fact. When you're out in the real world, when you're not in this environment to where most everything is structured and controlled on what to give them to do in the future for something else were to come up. Anybody else?
Any other questions while she's up here, so we won't. She could get her workout today.
Oh,
Back and forth.
I've got all kinds of workouts.
All right. Does anyone have any questions for Dr. Al or Tom? Well, we do have one here. And whichever one of you would like to answer this, what is currently missing in prevention?
I'll let the experts.
I think you could address that very well.
Yeah.
I always have something to say.
What is currently missing in prevention?
Y'all give me permission to talk about sensitive subjects, or I wouldn't be up here answering the question. And first of all, I don't know. We don't have all the answers to prevention. I've heard the word stigma mentioned because, like my college students, who now excel, I think everybody has a hunch that maybe. Everybody has a hunch that maybe they're a little less than the average college student. That's not true. There's a sensitivity and a brilliance in the alcoholic mind that I think of, and maybe it's because I grew up in a family that I didn't have some of the same stigma that society carries, but I've always thought of alcoholics having some quality, a little like autistic kids. If you work with autistic kids, in their own way, every one of those kids I've ever met has some quality of genius in the way they think. It's just not apparent. And I think the same way, like about what I've come to learn about alcoholism, about autism, I think of that as in the addicted person. What is that hidden quality that needs to be released to turn that life into something so valuable that it's really making that contribution? So I've got to, even in my own life, get over some of the stigma and prejudice that puts that barrier to assisting in recovery like I could. And I think other people have that kind of barrier, maybe even more. One of the barriers, and it was mentioned earlier, even though the name and the experience here is about opioid crisis, you guys are so sharp because you realize that the #1 drug in Kentucky and America is alcohol. And it's a hot button because we went through a terrible time last century, over 100 years ago, with prohibition that just didn't work. So I think one of the things that happens is that people, and I will say, I'm going to speak to the drinkers in the room now. I'm not a prohibitionist. Prohibition is when you have alcohol outlaw, but there's no problem if a person chooses to live a life without alcohol and drugs. That's not prohibition. You know, I know that with my DNA, I wouldn't last very long if alcohol and drugs was an important part of my life. And I'll go to parties, and it's important to know how many drinkers are in America because they speak with a loud voice. A third of the alcohol in America is consumed. A third of the people in America drink essentially all the alcohol. A third of the people in America, and it is hard for me to believe until I went back to that's what I do with science. When possible, I'll go back to the primary source data. And I went to Durham County, North Carolina, and I said, man, everybody drinks there. And I looked at the primary source county data, and you know, a third of the people drink all the alcohol. A third of the people don't drink at all. A third of the people drink, I say, when they have to, maybe New Year's or a wedding or something, but you know, on a once a month or less basis. And all the alcohol is consumed by a third of the people. So why do we all think that everybody drinks? Why do I go to places, wine and cheese parties, where I can't even, and I'm obnoxious, you don't want to be like me, but I'll make a big deal to the host. Why do I have to go back in the kitchen and get a paper cup and get water to drink with while I can eat my cheese? And I'm, you know, they don't do that again. Next time I'll go, they'll either won't invite me or they'll have ginger ale. And I've got a Sunday school group who I love, but man, they love their wine and champagne. We have a Christmas party, and I just put my sparkling apple juice on the coffee table with everybody else's wine and champagne. And I say, Al, is that what you drink? I said, yeah, I just, it works for me because I don't want to drink those carcinogenic beverages you guys bring. Because even, and I like, this is another way we get the message out, even at social doses, alcohol is dangerous. Now, you can decide what you want to do with that science, but that's science. The brain deteriorates. The #1 cause of osteoporosis in elderly men is alcohol. And guess what? We've got people who are now going, I hate to admit this, but people my age are going to assisted living, and it's like a reward to go to the meeting at night where you get your wine and your cheese and play bridge all night. You know, I don't want to offend anybody, but that's like going to hell before you die to me. You know, I want to do all the things like that, but I'm pretty vocal about what I believe, particularly if it contrasts with what I know reality is. You don't have to be like me, but I think there is an element where people, because some of the best people I've known in helping alcoholics and addicts are themselves social drinkers. Because if you drink socially and knowing what we know today, there's an investment you have in that consumption. And when somebody abuses that consumption, a person who drinks their wine in the evening might be the very best hope for that person getting into a recovery or treatment environment. So, you know, I think that those are some of the barriers, and it's a hard subject. I'm Mike, who drove from Raleigh with me, knows I'll talk about anything, but you know, there's some subjects that are hard to talk about that, you know, I'm too old to worry about anymore. So I'll let you young guys decide what to do with it. But I'm going to keep talking and appreciate those people that learn and carry a message that might save a person who's dying from substances and prevent my grandkids from from having it, or be there in the rooms with my grandkids if they get to a meeting or treatment somewhere. The thing.